The morning sun shined through the tall windows of JFK Airport in New York. People rushed everywhere with their bags and suitcases. Flight 237 to London was now boarding at Gate 42. Sarah Chen stood near the first-class entrance with a warm smile on her face. She had been a flight attendant for 15 years. She loved her job most days. Sarah watched as passengers walked down the jet bridge onto the plane, business people in suits, families excited for vacation. Everyone different but all going to the same place. She greeted each person with a friendly hello and helped them find their seats. Then she saw him. A black man walked onto the plane carrying just one small bag. He looked to be in his late 40s. His suit was beautiful. It was dark blue and fit him perfectly. The fabric looked expensive. Very expensive. His shoes were polished so well they almost shined. He wore a simple white shirt and a burgundy tie. Everything about him was neat and clean. But what struck Sarah most was how calm he seemed. He did not rush. He did not look stressed like most first-class passengers. He just walked slowly and quietly to his seat. He had a kind face. His hair had a little gray at the sides. He carried an old leather journal under his arm. The journal looked worn like he had used it for many years. The man sat down in seat 2A. It was a window seat in the second row of first class. He placed his small bag in the overhead bin himself. He did not ask for help. Then he sat down and opened his journal. He took out a pen and began writing something. He seemed peaceful. Like flying was just a normal part of his day. Sarah noticed some of her crew members gathering near the galley. The galley was the small kitchen area where flight attendants prepared drinks and food. 3 crew members stood there whispering. She saw Brad, a young flight attendant who had joined the team 6 months ago. Next to him was Jessica, who had worked for the airline for 3 years. Another crew member named Tom stood with them too. Sarah walked closer to see if they needed help with something. But as she got near, she heard their conversation. Her stomach felt tight. "Did you see that guy in 2A?" Brad said quietly. He looked back toward the passenger. "I wonder how he afforded first class." Jessica nodded. "I was thinking the same thing. First-class tickets to London cost thousands of dollars. Maybe he used all his savings?" Tom laughed a little. "Or maybe he got upgraded by mistake. That happens sometimes. The computer makes errors." Sarah felt uncomfortable. She knew what they were really saying. They were making assumptions. Bad assumptions. All because of the color of the man's skin. It made her angry but also sad. She had seen this before in her years of flying. But it never got easier to watch. "Maybe we should check his ticket," Brad suggested, "just to make sure everything is correct." Sarah stepped forward. "That will not be necessary," she said firmly. Her voice was quiet but strong. All passengers were checked at the gate. If he is sitting in that seat, he belongs in that seat. Brad looked surprised. "I was just saying—" "I know what you were saying," Sarah interrupted. She looked at each of them. "That passenger is a guest on our flight. Just like everyone else. We treat all guests with respect always, is that clear?" The 3 crew members nodded, but Sarah could tell they were not happy with her. They walked away to do their jobs. But Sarah knew the whispers would continue. She had worked with people like Brad before. People who made quick judgments about others. People who saw skin color before they saw human beings. Sarah walked down the aisle checking on passengers. She made sure everyone had what they needed. When she passed seat 2A, she glanced at the passenger. He was still writing in his journal. His face was peaceful. He seemed focused on his thoughts. For a moment, Sarah wondered what he was writing. Maybe he was a writer, or a teacher, or a businessman. It did not matter. What mattered was that he deserved respect. More passengers boarded the plane. First class filled up quickly. In seat 1A, right in front of the man in 2A, a white woman sat down. She wore a cream-colored suit and lots of jewelry, diamonds on her fingers, pearls around her neck. Her perfume was strong, too strong. It filled the whole cabin. The woman looked around first class like she owned it. She snapped her fingers at Tom to get champagne. Tom hurried to bring her a glass. The woman did not say thank you. She just took the glass and turned away. Sarah shook her head slightly. She had seen passengers like this too. People who thought money made them better than others. People who forgot that kindness costs nothing. The rest of the passengers found their seats. Economy class was filling up behind the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the plane. Children laughed. Babies cried. People talked and put bags away. It was the normal chaos of boarding. Sarah did one final walk through first class. She checked seatbelts. She reminded people to turn off their phones. When she reached the man in 2A, she paused. "Excuse me, sir," she said with a genuine smile. "Can I get you anything before we take off? Water, juice, coffee?" The man looked up from his journal. His eyes were kind, warm. "Hot tea would be wonderful, thank you," he said. His voice was deep and gentle. "No sugar, just plain." "Of course," Sarah said. "I will bring that right away." "Thank you," the man said. Then he added, "I appreciate your kindness." Something about the way he said it made Sarah pause. Like he really meant it. Like kindness was something special to him. Not just normal service. Sarah went to the galley to prepare his tea. While the water heated, she heard Brad and Jessica talking again. "He ordered tea," Brad said with a small laugh. "Not champagne. Probably cannot tell the difference anyway." Sarah felt her face get hot with anger. She wanted to say something. Something strong. But the captain's voice came over the speaker announcing they would take off soon. There was no time for arguments now. She prepared the tea carefully. She found the best cup. She made sure the water was the perfect temperature. She put the tea bag on a small plate with a spoon. Then she carried it to seat 2A. "Your tea, sir," she said, placing it on his tray table. "Thank you so much," the man said. He wrapped his hands around the warm cup and smiled. "Perfect." Sarah walked back to her jump seat near the front of the plane. She buckled her seatbelt for takeoff. Through the gap in the seats, she could see the man in 2A. He was sipping his tea slowly and looking out the window. The plane began to move. It rolled back from the gate. Then it turned and headed toward the runway. Sarah looked around first class one more time. The woman in 1A was already on her second glass of champagne. Other passengers read magazines or closed their eyes. And the man in 2A just sat quietly with his tea and his journal. Peaceful, calm, unbothered by the world around him. But Sarah was bothered. She was bothered by her crew's whispers. She was bothered by their quick judgments. Most of all, she was bothered because she knew this was just the beginning. It was going to be a long flight to London. The engines got louder. The plane moved faster down the runway. Then with a gentle lift, they were in the air. New York City got smaller below them. The Atlantic Ocean waited ahead. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. She hoped the flight would be smooth. But deep in her heart, she had a feeling that something was going to happen. Something that would change everything. The plane reached its cruising height of 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. Passengers unbuckled and began to move around. Some stood up to stretch. Others pulled out laptops to work. The woman in 1A immediately called for more champagne. Sarah stood up from her jump seat and smoothed her uniform. She walked to the galley to begin preparing the first-class meal service. But when she got there, she found Brad, Jessica, and Tom huddled together again. They were whispering and looking toward seat 2A. "I'm telling you," Brad said, keeping his voice low. "Something is off about him. First-class passengers usually ask for champagne right away. They want to feel important. But he just ordered tea." "Plain tea," Jessica nodded. "And did you see his bag?" It was so small. Most first-class passengers have expensive luggage. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, something with a brand name. His bag looked old. Tom leaned against the counter. "Maybe he is an athlete? You know, basketball player or football player. They fly first class sometimes." "No way," Brad said. "He is not tall enough for basketball, and he does not look strong enough for football. Maybe he is a rapper or a music producer." Sarah could not stay quiet anymore. She stepped into the galley with her arms crossed. "Why does he have to be an athlete or entertainer?" she asked. Her voice was sharp. "Why cannot he just be a businessman? Or a doctor? Or a lawyer?" The 3 crew members looked at her with surprise. Brad opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Jessica looked down at her shoes. "You are making assumptions based on nothing," Sarah continued. "Based on the color of his skin. Do you not see how wrong that is?" Brad finally found his voice. "I am not being racist, Sarah. I am just being realistic. You know how expensive these tickets are. I am just wondering how he can afford it." Sarah finished his sentence. "That is exactly my point, Brad. You are wondering how a black man can afford first class. But I did not hear you question anyone else's ticket." Not the white businessman in 3A, not the Asian woman in 4B, just him. The galley became very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the airplane engines. Tom looked uncomfortable. Jessica bit her lip. Brad's face turned red. We should focus on our jobs, Sarah said firmly. That means serving all passengers equally, with respect and kindness. Now let us start the meal service. Brad and Jessica nodded and began pulling out the meal carts, but Sarah could tell they were upset with her. They moved around the galley without talking. The friendly atmosphere from before was gone. Sarah took a deep breath. She did not like conflict, but she liked prejudice even less. She had seen too much of it in her life. Her own parents had come to America from China with almost nothing. They worked hard, they saved money, they built a good life, but people still made assumptions about them. Still treated them like they did not belong. She would not let that happen to the passenger in 2A. Not on her watch. Sarah pushed the beverage cart down the aisle. She stopped at each row to offer drinks. Water, juice, soda, wine. The passengers were polite. Most said thank you. Some barely looked up from their phones. When she reached seat 2A, Sarah paused. The man was reading now. He had put his journal away and was holding a book. Sarah noticed it was about economics and business. The cover looked serious and academic. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said gently. "Would you like another tea? Or perhaps something else to drink?" The man looked up and smiled. "Another tea would be lovely," he said. "You make excellent tea." Sarah felt herself smile back. "Thank you. That is very kind of you to say." As she prepared his tea, she noticed something. The man wore a watch. It was not flashy. Not covered in diamonds like some first-class passengers wore. But Sarah's father collected watches. She knew quality when she saw it. This watch was a Patek Philippe, one of the most expensive watch brands in the world. The particular model on the man's wrist cost more than a car, maybe more than a house. Sarah handed him his tea. "Here you are." "Thank you," the man said. Then he looked at her name tag. "Sarah, that is a beautiful name." "Thank you," she replied, surprised that he had taken the time to notice her name. Most first-class passengers never did. The man took a sip of his tea. "You know, I fly quite often, all over the world. And I can always tell which flight attendants truly care about their job. You are one of them. It shows in the small details." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "That means a lot to me. Thank you." She moved on to serve other passengers, but the man's words stayed with her. There was something different about him. Something special. She could feel it. Behind her, she heard Brad's voice. He was serving the rows behind seat 2A. She heard him talking to another passenger in a loud whisper. "I know, right?" Brad was saying. "Some people just know how to work the system. Probably use credit card points or something." Sarah turned around sharply. She gave Brad a hard look. He saw her and stopped talking. But the damage was done. Sarah wondered if the man in 2A had heard. She hoped not. The meal service continued. Sarah served chicken. Brad served fish. Jessica brought out bread rolls and salads. The cabin filled with the smell of hot food. Passengers ate and chatted. Some watched movies on their screens. The woman in 1A complained that her chicken was too dry. Then she complained that her wine glass was not full enough. Then she complained that the bread was not warm enough. Sarah handled each complaint with patience, but inside she felt tired. After the meal service, Sarah returned to the galley. She began washing dishes and putting things away. Brad came in with his empty cart. "Sarah, I'm sorry if I upset you," he said, but his voice did not sound sorry. It sounded annoyed. "I was not trying to be offensive. I was just making conversation." Sarah turned to face him. "Brad, let me tell you something. Every day people make assumptions about others, about what they can afford, about where they belong, about what they are capable of. These assumptions hurt people. They make people feel small, less than, not worthy." Brad crossed his arms. "You are being too sensitive." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You are being too insensitive. That passenger in 2A has done nothing wrong. He has been polite, quiet, kind, yet you have been talking about him since he boarded. Why, give me one good reason." Brad opened his mouth, then closed it. He could not give a good reason, because there was no good reason. "Exactly," Sarah said. "Now please let us just do our jobs properly." Brad walked away looking angry. Sarah knew she had made an enemy today, but she did not care. Some things were more important than being liked by coworkers. 2 hours into the flight, Sarah walked through the cabin again. She checked if anyone needed anything. Most passengers were sleeping now. The cabin lights were dimmed. Only the small reading lights glowed here and there. The man in 2A was awake. He was writing in his journal again. His pen moved across the page in smooth, steady strokes. Sarah wondered again what he was writing. Maybe notes for work. Maybe thoughts about life. Maybe just random ideas. As Sarah passed, the man looked up. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, of respect. Sarah nodded back. In that brief moment, Sarah felt something. A connection. Not romantic. Not friendly. Just human. Two people seeing each other. Really seeing each other. Beyond uniforms and assumptions and skin color, Sarah continued walking. But that moment stayed with her. It reminded her why she loved her job. Despite difficult passengers, despite rude coworkers, despite long hours and tired feet, she loved it because of moments like these. Moments of genuine human connection. She returned to the galley and found Jessica there. Jessica was drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone. "Hey, Sarah," Jessica said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Sarah replied. Jessica hesitated. "Do you really think we were being prejudiced?" "About the passenger in 2A?" Sarah poured herself some coffee and sat down. "Yes, I do." "Think about it, Jessica. What has he done to make you suspicious? Nothing. He has been a perfect passenger. Quiet, polite, easy. Yet you and Brad have been questioning everything about him. His ticket. His luggage. His drink choice. Why?" Jessica looked uncomfortable. "I guess. I do not know. I did not think about it like that." "That is the problem," Sarah said gently. "People do not think about it. They just react. They see someone who looks different and they make assumptions. Quick judgments, without even realizing they are doing it." Jessica nodded slowly. "You are right. I am sorry. I will do better." Sarah smiled. "Thank you for listening." "That is all I ask." Jessica stood up. "I am going to go offer him some more tea. And maybe some cookies. We have those good chocolate ones." "That is a nice idea," Sarah said. Jessica walked towards seat 2A with a small plate of cookies. Sarah watched from the galley. She saw Jessica smile and offer the cookies. She saw the man smile back and take one. He said something that made Jessica laugh. When Jessica came back, she looked thoughtful. "He is really nice," she said. We talked for a minute. He asked about my family, where I am from. He seemed genuinely interested. "See?" Sarah said. "When you treat people with respect, you get to know them. You see them as people, not stereotypes." Jessica nodded. "Yeah, I get it now." But even as Jessica walked away, Sarah saw Brad in the back galley. He was still whispering to Tom, still making comments, still judging. Sarah sighed. Some people learned. Some people did not. She just hoped Brad would not cause any real trouble before they landed in London. The plane flew on through the night sky. Below them, the Atlantic Ocean stretched dark and endless. Above them, stars twinkled in the blackness of space, and inside the plane, people slept and dreamed, each with their own stories, their own struggles, their own worth. Sarah looked out a small window. She said a quiet prayer that the rest of the flight would be peaceful, that everyone would arrive safely in London, that maybe, just maybe, some lessons would be learned. But deep down she had a feeling, a worry, that things were about to get much worse before they got better. 3 hours into the flight, most passengers were sleeping. The cabin was quiet except for the constant hum of the engines. The lights were still dimmed. Blankets covered sleeping bodies. Here and there, a phone screen glowed in the darkness. Sarah sat in the galley with a cup of coffee. Her feet hurt. They always did on long flights. But she could not rest yet. She was the senior flight attendant. She had to stay alert, had to make sure everything ran smoothly. Jessica was sleeping in the crew rest area. Tom was in the cockpit talking to the pilots. Brad was supposed to be checking the cabin, but Sarah had not seen him in a while. She made a mental note to find him later. Then she heard it. The call button, ding, ding, ding. The sound came from first class. Sarah stood up and walked quickly down the aisle. She looked at the panel above the seats to see which passenger was calling. Seat 1A, the woman with all the jewelry. Sarah took a deep breath and walked to the seat. The woman was awake and sitting up straight. Her lipstick was still perfect even after hours of flying. Her hair was styled without a single strand out of place. She looked at Sarah with cold eyes. "Yes, ma'am?" Sarah asked politely. "How can I help you?" The woman pointed behind her toward seat 2A. "I need to speak with you about that passenger behind me." Sarah's stomach dropped. She glanced back at seat 2A. The man was sleeping peacefully. His head rested against the window. His journal sat closed on his lap. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. "What about him, ma'am?" Sarah asked carefully. The woman lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "I am not comfortable sitting in front of him. I have a bad feeling. I want you to check his ticket. Make sure he is supposed to be here." Sarah felt her face grow hot, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "Ma'am, all passengers were checked at the gate. Everyone in first class has a valid ticket. I can assure you—" "I do not care what you assure me," the woman interrupted. Her voice grew louder. Other passengers started to wake up. "I am a platinum member of this airline. I fly first class every month. I pay good money for these seats, and I have a right to feel safe and comfortable." "Of course you do," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice soothing. "But that gentleman has done nothing wrong. He has been a quiet, respectful passenger." "There is no reason." "There is every reason," the woman snapped. She was not even trying to whisper anymore. "You do not know who he is. He could be anyone. He could be dangerous." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had dealt with difficult passengers before. She knew how to handle this. "Stay calm, stay professional. Do not make things worse, ma'am. I understand your concern, but I cannot question a passenger's right to be here based on your feelings. That would be discrimination. The airline takes that very seriously." The woman's eyes went wide. "Discrimination? Are you accusing me of discrimination?" "I am not accusing you of anything," Sarah said carefully. "I am simply explaining that all passengers deserve equal treatment." The woman stood up suddenly. She was tall, taller than Sarah. She looked down at Sarah with fury in her eyes. "I want to speak to the captain. Right now. This is unacceptable. I am being treated like a criminal for expressing legitimate concerns." By now several passengers were awake and watching. Sarah saw the man in 2A stir. His eyes opened. He looked confused. Then he saw the commotion and his face changed. He understood immediately what was happening. Sarah saw something flash in his eyes. Was it sadness? Disappointment? Resignation? That look broke Sarah's heart, because it meant this was not the first time. This man had experienced this before, maybe many times. And he knew exactly what was happening now. Brad appeared from the back of the plane. He had heard the raised voices. "What is going on here?" he asked. The woman pointed at Brad. Finally, someone with sense. "This flight attendant refuses to help me. I have concerns about the passenger behind me and she will not even check his ticket." Brad looked at Sarah. Then he looked at the man in 2A. Then back at the woman. Sarah could see him thinking. She could see him making a choice. "Ma'am, I am sure this is just a misunderstanding," Brad said in his smoothest voice. "Why do not I look into this for you? I am happy to verify everything is in order." Sarah grabbed Brad's arm. "Brad, no. You cannot." Brad pulled away. "Sarah, we need to address passenger concerns. That is part of our job." "Not when those concerns are based on prejudice," Sarah said firmly. She was not whispering anymore either. "That passenger has done absolutely nothing to warrant this." The woman smiled triumphantly. "See? At least this young man understands customer service. Unlike some people. Other passengers were fully awake now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed interested, like they were watching a show. A businessman in 3A shook his head disapprovingly, though Sarah could not tell if he disapproved of the woman or of the situation. The man in 2A slowly stood up. He was dignified even now, even in this horrible moment. He looked at Sarah with those kind eyes. "It is all right," he said softly. "I do not want to cause any trouble." "You are not causing trouble, sir," Sarah said quickly. Her voice cracked a little. "Please sit down. You have every right to be here." "I know I do," the man said. There was something in his voice now. Not anger, not defensiveness, just quiet strength. "But I have learned that sometimes it is easier to simply show proof than to argue about principles." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. He handed it to Sarah. His hand was steady, calm. Sarah took the boarding pass with shaking hands. She looked at it even though she did not need to. She knew it would be valid. Of course it was valid. Seat 2A, she read aloud. First class. Confirmed and paid. Brad snatched the boarding pass from Sarah's hand. He studied it closely like he was a detective searching for clues. Okay, but how did he pay for it? Did he use miles? Was it a company ticket? That is none of your business, Sarah said sharply. She grabbed the boarding pass back and returned it to the man. Sir, I apologize deeply for this intrusion. You should not have to prove anything. The man took his boarding pass and sat back down. Thank you, Sarah, I appreciate you. The woman in 1A was not satisfied. I still do not feel comfortable. I want to be moved. Give me a different seat, somewhere away from him. Sarah turned to face the woman fully. She was done being polite, done being diplomatic. Ma'am, first class is completely full. Every seat is taken. But even if there were available seats, I would not move you, because that would be giving in to discrimination, and I will not do that. The woman's mouth fell open. How dare you? I will report you. I will have your job. Do you know who I am? I am Patricia Whitmore. My husband is a board member at Whitmore Industries. One phone call from me and you will be fired. Then make that call, Sarah said calmly. But until we land in London, you will sit in your assigned seat, and you will stop harassing other passengers. That is final. Brad stepped between them. Sarah, maybe we should not be so hasty. Mrs. Whitmore is a valued customer. Perhaps if we just move the gentleman to another seat. No, Sarah said loudly. Too loudly. Other flight attendants appeared. Tom came running from the cockpit area. Jessica emerged from the crew rest area looking sleepy and confused. What is happening? Jessica asked. Mrs. Whitmore pointed a manicured finger at Sarah. This flight attendant is being incredibly rude. I made a simple request and she has treated me like a criminal. I demand she be removed from duty. Tom looked at Sarah with concern. Sarah? Sarah explained everything quickly. The complaint, the request to check the ticket, Brad's willingness to interrogate an innocent passenger, her refusal to participate in discrimination. As she spoke, she watched Tom's face. She had known Tom for 5 years. He was a good man, a fair man. She hoped he would support her. Tom looked at Mrs. Whitmore, then at Brad, then at the man in 2A who sat quietly watching everything. Finally, Tom looked back at Sarah. Sarah is right, Tom said firmly. We cannot question a passenger without cause. That gentleman has been nothing but polite. This conversation is over, Mrs. Whitmore gasped. Fine. When I call the airline tomorrow, all of you will be sorry. Especially you, she pointed at Sarah. You will never work in aviation again. That is your choice, ma'am, Sarah said. But right now I need you to sit down and lower your voice. You are disturbing other passengers. For a moment, Sarah thought Mrs. Whitmore might explode. Her face turned red. Her hands formed fists. But then she sat down hard in her seat and turned away. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. Sarah knew what she was doing. Writing complaints, sending emails, making calls, trying to get Sarah fired. Brad looked disappointed. He had wanted to be the hero, the one who sided with the rich passenger, the one who got praise and maybe a tip. Instead, he had been overruled. Tom put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. Go take a break. I will handle things here, Sarah nodded. She felt shaky. Adrenaline was leaving her body. She walked to the galley and sat down hard on the jump seat. Jessica followed her. Sarah, are you okay? No, Sarah admitted. I am not okay. That was horrible. You did the right thing, Jessica said. That woman was way out of line. I know, Sarah said. But doing the right thing might cost me my job. Through the galley opening, Sarah could see seat 2A. The man had put his head back against the window. His eyes were closed. But Sarah did not think he was sleeping. She thought he was just trying to escape, trying to pretend he was somewhere else. Somewhere he was not being judged, not being questioned, not being treated like he did not belong. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This was not what she signed up for. She became a flight attendant to help people, to make their journeys comfortable and safe, to connect different parts of the world. But sometimes the world was ugly. Sometimes people were cruel. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone. She wiped her eyes quickly. She could not cry. Not here, not now. She still had 4 more hours until they landed in London. 4 more hours of pretending everything was fine. But Sarah knew nothing was fine. Mrs. Whitmore would make good on her threats. She would call. She would complain. She would demand punishment, and Sarah would probably face consequences. At best, a stern warning. At worst, termination. But even knowing all that, Sarah did not regret her choice. That man in 2A deserved dignity. He deserved respect, and Sarah had given him that, even if it cost her everything. Sarah sat in the galley staring at nothing. Her hands still shook slightly from the confrontation. 20 minutes had passed since the incident with Mrs. Whitmore. The cabin was quiet again. Most passengers had gone back to sleep or to watching their movies. But Sarah could not relax. Jessica sat across from her eating a sandwich. Tom had returned to his duties. Brad was somewhere in the back of the plane avoiding Sarah. That was fine with her. She did not want to talk to him anyway. "You should eat something," Jessica said, pushing a sandwich towards Sarah. "I am not hungry," Sarah replied. "When was the last time you ate?" Sarah thought about it. Before the flight? She could not remember. The day had become a blur of stress and anger and disappointment. "Here," Jessica said, putting the sandwich in Sarah's hand. "At least take a few bites. You need your energy." Sarah unwrapped the sandwich mechanically. Turkey and cheese. She took a small bite. It tasted like cardboard. Everything tasted like cardboard when you were upset. Then the phone rang. It was the internal phone mounted on the galley wall, the one that connected to the cockpit and to ground control and to headquarters. Sarah and Jessica both looked at it. The phone rarely rang during flights unless something was wrong. Sarah stood up and answered it. "This is Sarah Chen, senior flight attendant. Sarah, this is Gregory from headquarters. I need to speak with you about a very sensitive matter." Sarah's heart sank. This was it. Mrs. Whitmore had already called. Already complained. They were probably going to suspend her mid-flight, ask her to stay in the galley. Not interact with passengers. The ultimate humiliation. "Yes, sir," Sarah said quietly. "I understand there was an incident with a passenger. I can explain." "Sarah, stop," Gregory interrupted. His voice sounded strange, stressed. "This is not what you think. I need you to answer a question for me. Is the passenger in seat 2A being treated with respect?" Sarah blinked in confusion. That was not what she expected him to say. "Yes, sir." "I mean, I am treating him with respect. But some crew members and another passenger have been problematic." There was a pause on the line. Sarah could hear Gregory breathing. She heard muffled voices in the background, like other people were in the room with him. "Important people." "Define problematic," Gregory said carefully. Sarah explained everything, the whispers from Brad and the others, the assumptions about how the passenger could afford first class, Mrs. Whitmore's complaint and demand to check his ticket, Brad's willingness to interrogate an innocent passenger, her own refusal to participate. As she spoke, Sarah heard the voices in the background grow louder. Someone said something that sounded like a curse. Another voice said, "This is bad. This is really bad." When Sarah finished, there was a long silence, so long that Sarah thought maybe the connection had dropped. "Gregory, are you still there?" "Yes," he said finally. His voice sounded tired. "Sarah, I need you to sit down for what I am about to tell you." "Are you sitting?" "Yes," Sarah lied. She was standing, but she grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. "The passenger in seat 2A," Gregory began slowly, "is Julian Westbrook. Do you know that name?" Sarah searched her memory. Westbrook. It sounded familiar, but she could not place it. "I am sorry, no." "Should I?" Gregory sighed. "Julian Westbrook is the founder and CEO of Westbrook Global Investments, one of the largest investment firms in the world. He manages billions of dollars. And Sarah, he personally owns 12% of our airline stock. He is one of our largest shareholders." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun slightly. She sat down hard on the jump seat. "What?" He told the board he was taking this flight. He wanted to experience our service as a regular passenger. He wanted to see how our crew treats people without knowing who they are. It was supposed to be a routine quality check. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "He has been filing reports to the board throughout the flight," Gregory continued. "He has been documenting everything. The whispers, the assumptions, the complaints, all of it." Sarah's mind raced. Every conversation in the galley, every suspicious look Brad gave, every time someone questioned the passenger's right to be there, all of it witnessed by one of the airline's owners. "Sarah, are you there?" "Yes," Sarah managed. "I am here." The board is meeting right now. Emergency meeting. They are discussing what to do. This is a disaster. Do you understand? This could be a public relations nightmare. It could affect our stock price. Our reputation, everything. Sarah found her voice. Sir, with all respect, maybe it should be a disaster. Maybe people need to know this happened. The passenger did nothing wrong. He was polite and kind. But my crew treated him like a criminal just because of the color of his skin. I know, Gregory said softly. I know, and honestly, Sarah, you are the only one who comes out of this looking good. Mr. Westbrook specifically mentioned you in his reports. He said you were the only crew member who treated him with dignity, who stood up for him when others questioned his presence. Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were different tears. Not tears of frustration or anger. Tears of relief, of validation. What happens now? Sarah asked. I do not know yet, Gregory admitted. The board is still talking. But Sarah, between you and me, you are going to be fine. Better than fine. But the others... He trailed off. Sarah thought of Brad, of his smug face when he offered to check Mr. Westbrook's ticket. She thought of Mrs. Whitmore with her jewelry and her demands and her threats. What about the passenger who complained? Sarah asked. Mrs. Whitmore? She will be dealt with, Gregory said firmly. The board is discussing banning her from the airline. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. We just do not always enforce it as well as we should. Sarah nodded even though Gregory could not see her. I am glad. Sarah, for the rest of this flight, I need you to continue doing what you have been doing. Treat Mr. Westbrook with respect, but do not tell him you know who he is. Let him maintain his privacy. Can you do that? Of course, Sarah said. That is what I would do anyway. I know, Gregory said. There was warmth in his voice now, pride. That is why you are getting promoted. The board has already decided. When you land, you will be offered a position as crew trainer. Better pay, more responsibility. You will help train the next generation of flight attendants. Teach them what real service looks like, what real respect looks like. Sarah could not speak. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Promoted? After she thought she was going to be fired? Sarah? Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing the right thing. Even when it was hard, even when others did not support you. That takes courage. We need more people like you. Gregory gave her a few more instructions and then hung up. Sarah sat holding the silent phone. Her whole body felt numb, shocked. Jessica was staring at her with wide eyes. What was that about? You look like you saw a ghost. Sarah looked at Jessica. Could she tell her? Should she tell her? Gregory had said not to tell Mr. Westbrook, but he had not said anything about the crew. No. Sarah decided to keep it to herself for now. Knowledge was power, and right now she needed to think carefully about how to use that power. Just headquarters checking on the incident with Mrs. Whitmore. Sarah said carefully. They wanted my version of what happened. Are you in trouble? No, Sarah said. She allowed herself a small smile. I am not in trouble. Jessica looked relieved. Good, because what you did was brave. Standing up to that awful woman, defending that poor man. That poor man, Sarah thought. If only Jessica knew. Sarah stood up and smoothed her uniform. She felt different now. Lighter somehow. The weight of worry had lifted. She was not going to be fired. She was going to be promoted. And more importantly, the right people knew the truth about what had happened. She walked through the cabin doing her normal checks. When she passed Mrs. Whitmore's seat, the woman glared at her. Sarah smiled politely and kept walking. Let Mrs. Whitmore glare. Let her make her threats. They meant nothing now. When Sarah reached seat 2A, she paused. Mr. Westbrook was awake. He was looking out the window at the darkness. At the ocean far below. Excuse me, sir, Sarah said softly. Is there anything I can get for you? More tea, perhaps? Mr. Westbrook turned and looked at her. Really looked at her. His eyes were intelligent, thoughtful. Sarah wondered how many people he had watched during his life, how many situations he had observed, how many injustices he had witnessed. No, thank you, Sarah, he said. I am fine. You have taken excellent care of me tonight. It is my pleasure, Sarah said, and she meant it. As she walked away, Sarah realized something. Mr. Westbrook had been testing the airline, testing the crew. But he had also been living a reality that millions of people lived every day, being judged, being questioned, Being made to prove they belonged. Even with all his money and power and success, he still faced discrimination. He still had to endure suspicious looks and whispered comments. He still had to decide whether to challenge prejudice or just endure it quietly. That was the real lesson of this flight. Not that a rich man caught employees behaving badly, but that racism and prejudice affected everyone. From ordinary passengers to billionaire investors. No amount of money or achievement could fully protect you from other people's biases. Sarah returned to the galley. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down. Her mind was spinning with everything that had happened. Everything that was going to happen. Somewhere in the back of the plane, Brad was probably still complaining. Still convinced he had done nothing wrong. He would learn soon enough. Mrs. Whitmore was probably still typing angry messages on her phone. Still believing her money and status made her right. She would learn soon enough too. But Mr. Westbrook already knew. He had probably known for his entire life that the world would judge him. That he would have to work twice as hard to earn half as much respect. That his skin color would always matter to some people more than his character or his achievements. And yet he still flew coach class. Still tested his own airline. Still cared about how ordinary passengers were treated. That said something about his character. Sarah looked at the clock on the galley wall. 3 more hours until London. 3 more hours of this flight. But already everything had changed. The consequences were set in motion. Wheels were turning. Decisions were being made in boardrooms and offices. By the time they landed, nothing would be the same. For Brad, for Mrs. Whitmore, for Sarah herself. Sarah sipped her coffee and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had done the right thing. And for once, doing the right thing had actually worked out. But her satisfaction was mixed with sadness. Because it should not have taken a billionaire being treated badly for justice to happen. It should have been enough that it was simply wrong. That a passenger was being discriminated against. The right thing should be the right thing regardless of who was watching or who was affected. Sarah made a promise to herself. When she became a crew trainer, she would teach that lesson. Every single day, to every single trainee. Respect was not something you gave only when someone might be important. Respect was something you gave to everyone, always. Because everyone deserved it. That was real service. That was real humanity. And that was what she would teach. Sarah sat very still in the galley. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands. She had been staring at the same spot on the wall for 10 minutes. Her mind kept replaying the phone call. Every word. Every pause. Every terrible revelation. Julian Westbrook, one of the airline's biggest shareholders. And her crew had spent hours questioning his right to be there. Sarah's hands started shaking again, but this time not from anger or fear, from the sheer enormity of what had happened. What was still happening? She stood up and walked to the small galley window. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. They had been flying for nearly 5 hours. In 3 more hours, they would land in London. And then what? Sarah thought about Brad. Right now, he probably felt smug. Probably thought he had been right to question Mr. Westbrook. Probably thought Sarah was just being overly sensitive and politically correct. Brad had no idea his career was about to end. Sarah thought about Mrs. Whitmore. The woman was probably already planning what she would say when she called the airline. How she would describe Sarah's rudeness. How she would demand compensation and apologies. Mrs. Whitmore had no idea she was about to be banned from the airline. And then there was Mr. Westbrook himself, sitting quietly in seat 2A, reading his book, drinking his tea, observing everything with those intelligent, sad eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. He had probably planned this whole thing. A test, an experiment, to see how his airline treated passengers when no one knew they were being watched. The airline had failed. Failed spectacularly. Sarah felt a wave of shame wash over her. Yes, she had done the right thing personally. But she was part of this crew. Part of this airline. Part of a system that allowed people like Brad to treat passengers with suspicion and disrespect. Sarah? Jessica's voice broke through her thoughts. Are you okay? You have been standing there forever. Sarah turned. Jessica looked concerned. Kind. Sarah realized that Jessica had learned something tonight. Had changed. That was something at least. I am fine, Sarah said. Just tired. Why do not you take a break? Go rest in the crew area. I can handle things here. No, Sarah said quickly. I need to stay. I need to, what? Watch over Mr. Westbrook? Make sure nothing else went wrong? It was probably too late for that. The damage was done. The reports had been filed. The board was meeting. Decisions were being made. Sarah heard footsteps. Brad appeared from the back of the plane. He was carrying empty water bottles to dispose of. When he saw Sarah, his expression hardened. Sarah, we need to talk, he said. I do not think we have anything to talk about, Sarah replied coolly. Yes, we do. You made me look bad in front of passengers. You challenged me in front of everyone. That was unprofessional. Sarah felt anger flare up again. You want to talk about unprofessional? You wanted to interrogate a passenger for no reason. You made assumptions based on race. You sided with a discriminatory complaint. That is unprofessional. Brad's face turned red. I was just trying to do my job. Trying to address a passenger concern. That concern was based on prejudice, Sarah said firmly, and you should have recognized that. You should have refused to participate. That is what doing your job actually means. Brad threw the water bottles into the trash harder than necessary. You know what your problem is, Sarah? You think you are better than everyone else. You think you are some kind of hero, but you are just making things harder for all of us. How am I making things harder? By not going along. By causing scenes. By questioning everything. Sometimes you just have to do what the passenger wants, even if you do not agree with it. That is customer service, Sarah stared at him. No, Brad, that is not customer service. That is cowardice. Real customer service means treating all customers equally, with dignity, with respect. Not just the ones who complain the loudest or have the most money. Brad shook his head. Whatever. I am done with this conversation. When we land, I am filing a complaint about you, about your attitude and your lack of team cooperation. You do that, Sarah said calmly. Let him file his complaint. Let him dig his grave even deeper. He would find out soon enough how badly he had miscalculated. Brad stormed off. Jessica watched him go and then looked at Sarah with wide eyes. He is really going to complain about you? Apparently, Sarah said. She sat down feeling exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off again. Leaving her feeling hollow and tired, Jessica sat next to her. Sarah, can I tell you something? When I first started working here, I was like Brad. I made assumptions about passengers, about who belonged in first class and who did not. I never thought of it as prejudice. I just thought I was being observant, aware. Sarah looked at her. What changed? You did, Jessica said simply. Watching you tonight. How you stood up for that passenger. How you refused to compromise. It made me realize I was wrong. I was judging people without knowing anything about them. And that is not okay. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. Maybe this nightmare had at least one good outcome. If Jessica could learn. If she could change. Then maybe others could too. Thank you for telling me that, Sarah said. I'm going to be better, Jessica promised. I am going to treat every passenger the same. With respect. No matter what they look like or how much money I think they have. Sarah smiled. That makes me happy to hear. Tom appeared from the cockpit area. He looked stressed. His normally calm face was tight with worry. Sarah, I just got a call from the captain. Headquarters wants to speak with you again. Use the cockpit phone. They said it is urgent. Sarah's heart jumped. What now? She followed Tom to the cockpit. The pilots greeted her with serious faces. They knew something was happening. Something big. The captain handed her the phone. Here, they are waiting. Sarah took the phone with shaking hands. This is Sarah Chen. Sarah, it is Gregory again. We have a situation developing. What kind of situation? Mrs. Whitmore has been calling the airline non-stop. She has left 17 voice messages. She has sent dozens of emails. She has contacted every executive whose information she could find. She is demanding your immediate termination and threatening to sue the airline. Sarah's stomach dropped. I see, but that is not all. She also posted about the incident on social media, on 3 different platforms. She has over 50,000 followers. Her posts are already getting attention. What did she say in the posts? Gregory sighed. She said she was harassed by a rude flight attendant who refused to address her safety concerns. She said she felt threatened by another passenger, and the crew did nothing. She is painting herself as the victim. That is not what happened, Sarah said. Her voice shook with anger. I know, but Sarah, this is about to blow up. Her followers are already commenting. sharing the posts. Some are agreeing with her. Some are calling for the airline to respond. This is becoming a public relations crisis. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore would do this. People like her always did. They twisted the truth, made themselves the heroes of their own stories. What do you want me to do? Sarah asked. Nothing. Do not engage. Do not respond. Let headquarters handle it. The legal team is already preparing a response. But Sarah, you need to know, this is going to get messy before it gets better. I understand. The good news is we have Mr. Westbrook's reports, documentation of everything that really happened. When the truth comes out, Mrs. Whitmore is going to look very bad. But in the meantime, you might face some online harassment, some negative attention. Are you prepared for that? Was she prepared? Sarah did not know. She had never dealt with anything like this before. The thought of thousands of strangers reading lies about her, judging her, hating her. It made her feel sick. But she had done the right thing. She knew she had done the right thing. That had to count for something. I am prepared, Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. Good, stay strong. This will pass, and you will come out on the other side better for it. I promise. Sarah hung up and handed the phone back to the captain. She stood in the cockpit for a moment, trying to steady herself. The pilots watched her with sympathetic eyes. Rough flight? The co-pilot asked gently. You could say that, Sarah replied. She left the cockpit and walked back through the plane. Passengers were starting to wake up. The cabin lights had brightened. Flight attendants were preparing breakfast service. Sarah looked at seat 2A as she passed. Mr. Westbrook was awake and writing in his journal again. His pen moved across the page steadily, recording everything, documenting everything. What was he writing? Sarah wondered. Was he writing about Brad's suspicious glances? About Mrs. Whitmore's discriminatory complaint? About Sarah's defense of him? Or was he writing about something deeper, about how it felt to be judged constantly, to have people question your right to exist in certain spaces, to know that no matter how successful you became, some people would still only see your skin color? Sarah returned to the galley. Jessica was preparing breakfast trays. Tom was checking the coffee makers. And somewhere in the back, Brad was probably still seething about their argument. In 3 hours, they would land. In 3 hours, everything would change. Brad would be suspended, maybe fired, his dreams of a long aviation career destroyed by his own prejudice. Mrs. Whitmore would be banned from the airline. Her social media posts would backfire when the truth came out, her reputation damaged by her own discrimination, and Sarah would be promoted, given more responsibility, asked to train the next generation, but right now in this moment she just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of standing up to wrong, tired of being the only one who seemed to care. Jessica noticed her expression. Sarah, what is wrong now? Sarah almost told her, almost explained everything. About Mr. Westbrook, about the phone calls from headquarters, about Mrs. Whitmore's social media posts, about the storm that was coming, but she stopped herself. Some things were better left unsaid. For now. Nothing, Sarah said. Just a long night. Almost over, Jessica said encouragingly. Just a few more hours and we land. Then you can go home and sleep for a week. Sarah smiled weakly. If only it were that simple. She suspected she would not be sleeping much in the coming days. There would be meetings, reports to file, statements to give, and probably media attention once the truth came out. The airline would want to turn this into a positive story. Look how we handled discrimination. Look how we stood up for what was right. Look how we promoted the hero. But Sarah did not feel like a hero. She just felt like a person who did what anyone should do. Treat others with respect. Stand up against wrong. Do the right thing even when it was hard. That should not be heroic. That should just be normal. Expected. Required. The fact that it was considered exceptional said more about society than it did about Sarah. She took a deep breath and picked up a breakfast tray. Time to keep working. Time to keep serving. Time to get through these last few hours. But her mind kept going back to Mr. Westbrook, sitting quietly in 2A, observing everything, recording everything, knowing everything. He had set this whole thing in motion. Had he known it would turn out this way? Had he predicted Brad's prejudice and Mrs. Whitmore's complaint? Or had he simply hoped for better? Hoped his airline would pass the test? Hoped his employees would treat all passengers with dignity? Sarah suspected it was the latter. She suspected Mr. Westbrook had hoped he was wrong, hoped that discrimination was not as prevalent as he feared, but he had been disappointed. Again, probably not for the first time in his life. And that made Sarah sadder than anything else about this whole terrible night, 1 hour before landing. Sarah made a decision. She could not carry this knowledge alone anymore. The weight of it was crushing her. Brad and Jessica deserved to know what was coming. They deserved a chance to understand the magnitude of what had happened. She called an emergency crew meeting in the rear galley. Tom, Jessica, and Brad all gathered around looking confused and annoyed. Emergency meetings during flights were unusual. Something serious must be happening. What is this about? Brad asked impatiently. We have landing preparations to do. Sarah looked at each of them. Tom with his worried eyes. Jessica with her curious expression. Brad with his defensive posture. She took a deep breath. I need to tell you something about the passenger in seat 2A, Sarah began. Brad rolled his eyes. Oh God, are we still talking about this? Sarah, let it go. That situation is over. No, Brad, it is not over. It is just beginning. Sarah paused. That passenger's name is Julian Westbrook. Tom's eyes went wide. Wait, Julian Westbrook? The investor? Yes, Sarah confirmed. The founder and CEO of Westbrook Global Investments. And more importantly, he owns 12% of this airline's stock. He is one of our largest shareholders. The color drained from Brad's face. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Even Tom, who had supported Sarah earlier, looked shocked. No, Brad whispered. No, that cannot be true. You are making this up. I am not making it up. Headquarters called me. Twice. He has been documenting everything that happened on this flight. He told the board he was flying as a regular passenger to evaluate our service quality. Every conversation, every whisper, every assumption, all of it has been recorded. Brad grabbed the counter to steady himself. But I did not know. How was I supposed to know? Sarah's voice was sharp. That is exactly the point, Brad. You should not have needed to know. You should have treated him with respect regardless of who he was. You should have treated every passenger with respect. But instead you spent hours making assumptions about him, questioning whether he belonged in first class, offering to interrogate him based on nothing but the color of his skin. I did not. Brad could not finish his sentences. His whole body was shaking. Jessica spoke up, her voice small. Sarah, I was part of that too. I whispered about him. I made assumptions. Am I going to be fired? Sarah softened slightly. Jessica, you showed growth. You apologized. You changed your behavior. That matters. The board knows the difference between someone who made a mistake and learned from it, and someone who doubled down on discrimination. Jessica looked at Brad. Brad looked away. When I called Mrs. Whitmore out for her discriminatory complaint, Sarah continued, Brad sided with her. He wanted to check Mr. Westbrook's ticket. He wanted to question him. He wanted to make him prove he belonged. All because a racist passenger demanded it. She was not racist, Brad protested weakly. She was just concerned about what? Sarah interrupted. About a quiet, polite passenger who was reading a book and drinking tea. What exactly was concerning about that? Be honest, Brad. Was it his behavior that concerned Mrs. Whitmore? Or was it his skin color? Brad opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because they both knew the answer. Everyone in that galley knew the answer. Mrs. Whitmore has already been posting on social media. Sarah continued, lying about what happened, saying she was harassed and threatened. Her posts are getting thousands of views. But headquarters has Mr. Westbrook's documentation. They have the truth. When that comes out, she is going to be banned from the airline. And Brad, you are going to be suspended, possibly terminated. Brad slid down to sit on the floor. He put his head in his hands. My career. My whole career. I have been working toward this for years. Yes, Sarah said without sympathy. And you threw it away because you could not treat a black passenger with basic respect. Because you made assumptions based on prejudice. Because when given a choice between doing what was right and doing what was easy, you chose easy. Tom finally spoke. Sarah, what happens now? When we land, headquarters will be waiting. There will be interviews, investigations, statements. Brad will likely be escorted off the property. Mrs. Whitmore will receive a formal ban letter. Sarah paused. I am being promoted to crew trainer. Jessica's face lit up slightly. Sarah, that is wonderful. You deserve it, do I? Sarah asked. I just did what anyone should do. I treated a passenger with dignity. That should not be exceptional. That should be the bare minimum. But it was exceptional, Tom said gently, because you stood up when others did not. You defended him when we were all too afraid or too blind. You put your job on the line for a stranger. He was not a stranger, Sarah said. He was a passenger, a human being. That should have been enough. Brad looked up from his hands. His eyes were red. Sarah, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not see it. I did not understand. But I see it now. I understand now. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to accept his apology, to believe in redemption and second chances. But another part of her was tired. Tired of giving grace to people who only apologized when they faced consequences. Brad, you are not sorry you were prejudiced. You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry there are consequences. If Mr. Westbrook had been a regular passenger with no power, you would still think you did nothing wrong. You would still be defending your actions. That is not real understanding. That is just fear. Brad flinched like she had slapped him, but he did not argue, because deep down he knew she was right. Jessica wiped tears from her eyes. What should we do? Finish the flight professionally, Sarah instructed. Continue serving all passengers with respect. And when we land, face the consequences of our actions with dignity. The meeting ended. Tom, Jessica, and Brad dispersed to their stations. Sarah stayed in the rear galley for a moment, collecting herself. She heard footsteps. Tom had come back. Sarah, can I say something? Of course. What you did tonight. It was brave. Really brave. I have been flying for 10 years and I have seen discrimination happen. I have seen crew members whisper and make assumptions. I have seen passengers complain about people who look different from them. And most times, including my own times, I stayed quiet. I did not want to make waves. Did not want to cause trouble. Tom looked ashamed. But you showed me that staying quiet is its own kind of wrong. That not standing up makes you part of the problem. I should have supported you louder. I should have shut down Brad's comments from the beginning. I am sorry I did not. Sarah put her hand on his arm. Tom, you supported me when it mattered most. During the confrontation with Mrs. Whitmore, that took courage. You are a good person. I want to be better, Tom said. Will you help me? When you become a trainer, will you teach me how to be better? Of course, Sarah promised. We can all be better. That is the point. We can all learn. We can all grow. Tom nodded and left. Sarah stood alone in the galley, feeling overwhelmed. So much had happened in one flight. So much had changed. So many lives were about to be altered forever. She walked back through the cabin one last time before landing preparations began. Passengers were finishing breakfast, packing their belongings, getting ready to arrive in London. Mrs. Whitmore sat in 1A still typing on her phone, still posting her lies, still convinced she was the victim. Sarah wondered how long it would take for the truth to catch up with her. Hours, days? The internet moved fast. The truth would come out soon, and when it did, Mrs. Whitmore would face her own reckoning. Her social media followers would turn on her. Her friends would distance themselves. Her reputation would crumble, all because she could not tolerate sitting near a black man in first class. Sarah reached seat 2A. Mr. Westbrook had put his journal away. He was looking out the window at the English countryside coming into view. They were beginning their descent. Excuse me, sir, Sarah said softly. We will be landing soon. Can I take your teacup? Mr. Westbrook turned to her. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes. Appreciation, respect, maybe even a little hope. Thank you, Sarah, he said, for everything. Sarah knew he was not just thanking her for the tea. He was thanking her for her defense, her dignity, her refusal to compromise. You are very welcome, sir, Sarah said. She wanted to say more, wanted to apologize for Brad, for Mrs. Whitmore, for every person who had ever made him feel less than. But she did not, because some things did not need to be said. He already knew. As Sarah walked away, Mr. Westbrook called after her. Sarah? She turned back. Do not let them break you, he said quietly. This world needs people like you. People who stand up. People who refuse to look away. Keep being that person. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I will, I promise. The plane descended through clouds. The captain announced their final approach. Flight attendants took their seats. Passengers buckled their belts. Sarah sat in her jump seat and looked around the cabin one last time. This flight that had started like any other had become something extraordinary. Something that would define careers, change lives, teach lessons in minutes they would land. The plane's wheels would touch the runway. The engines would reverse. They would taxi to the gate, and then the real consequences would begin. Brad would face his failures. Mrs. Whitmore would face her bigotry. And Mr. Westbrook would face the sad reality that even with all his success and wealth and power, he still could not escape discrimination. But Sarah would face something different. She would face an opportunity, a chance to make real change, to train the next generation better, to create a culture where what happened on this flight could never happen again. The wheels touched down with a gentle bump. They had arrived in London. The flight was over, but the impact of this flight would last much longer. For everyone involved, Sarah closed her eyes and said a quiet prayer. For justice, for learning, for hope that humanity could be better. When she opened her eyes, she was ready for whatever came next, ready to face it with the same courage and integrity she had shown all night, because that was who she was. That was who she would always be, and no one could take that away from her. The plane rolled slowly toward the gate at Heathrow Airport. Sarah could see through the windows that it was a gray London morning. Rain drizzled against the glass. People hurried across the tarmac with umbrellas. Everything looked normal, ordinary, like this was just another flight arriving from New York. But nothing about this flight had been ordinary. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. The passengers were gathering their bags from overhead bins. Phones were turning on with beeps and chimes. People were stretching after the long flight. Normal landing activities, but Sarah felt anything but normal. Her legs were shaky as she moved to her position near the exit. She would stand there and say goodbye to each passenger as they left. It was standard procedure, but today it felt different. More important, more final. The gate agent opened the door. Fresh air rushed into the cabin. Sarah put on her professional smile and began saying goodbye. Thank you for flying with us. Have a wonderful day. Welcome to London. Enjoy your stay. Safe travels. Thank you for choosing our airline. The passengers filed past. Business people already on their phones. Families with tired children. Couples holding hands. Each one had their own story, their own destination, their own life. Mrs. Whitmore approached the door. She was talking loudly on her phone, her voice dripping with outrage. Yes, Mother, it was absolutely dreadful. The service was terrible. I am filing a formal complaint. The flight attendant was incredibly rude. Sarah kept her smile in place. Have a nice day, ma'am. Mrs. Whitmore did not even look at her. Just walked past, still complaining, into her phone. Sarah wondered how long it would be before Mrs. Whitmore received the ban letter. Hours, minutes? She hoped someone from headquarters was waiting for her right now. More passengers left. The cabin slowly emptied, and then Mr. Westbrook appeared. He carried his small worn bag. His leather journal was tucked under his arm. He looked calm, dignified, unbothered by everything that had happened. When he reached Sarah, he stopped. He extended his hand. Sarah shook it. His handshake was firm, warm. Thank you, Sarah Chen, he said, looking directly into her eyes. You have restored some of my faith in humanity today. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Sir, I just did what was right. Exactly, Mr. Westbrook said. You did what was right when others did not. When it would have been easier to stay silent. When you risked your job to defend a stranger. That is integrity. That is character. That is who you are. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Sarah. It was simple, elegant, just his name and a phone number. My assistant will be calling you this week, he said. The airline is promoting you to crew trainer. But I want to offer you something more. I want you to consult on a diversity and inclusion program for the entire airline. Help us train not just flight attendants, but everyone. Gate agents, pilots, management, everyone who interacts with passengers. Sarah looked at the card in her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly. Sir, I do not know what to say. Say yes, Mr. Westbrook said with a gentle smile. The world needs more people like you in positions of influence. People who will not compromise, who will not look away. Who will stand up even when it costs them something? Yes, Sarah whispered. Yes, I will do it. Good. Mr. Westbrook picked up his bag. Oh, and Sarah? That young man Brad, the one who wanted to check my ticket. The board is suspending him for 6 months without pay. But after that, I want you to personally oversee his retraining. If he shows genuine growth, genuine understanding, then maybe he deserves a second chance. What do you think? Sarah thought about Brad, his assumptions, his prejudice, his fear when he learned the truth. She thought about how he had apologized even if it was only after facing consequences. I think people can change, Sarah said slowly, if they truly want to, if they do the hard work. I will work with him, but he has to prove he is serious about learning. Fair enough, Mr. Westbrook said. Thank you again, Sarah, for your courage, for your kindness, for seeing me as a person, not a color or a stereotype. He walked off the plane. Sarah watched him go. This man who owned part of an airline but flew to test its service. This man who faced discrimination despite his success and power. This man who still believed in second chances and human potential. The rest of the crew gathered near the exit. Tom looked relieved to be on the ground. Jessica looked nervous. And Brad? Brad looked destroyed. His face was pale. His eyes were red. He could barely stand. Sarah heard footsteps behind them. She turned to see 3 people in airline uniforms walking down the jet bridge. Management, here to collect Brad. Brad Henderson? One of them asked. Brad nodded weakly. Please come with us. We need to conduct an interview regarding incidents on this flight. Brad looked at Sarah one last time. His eyes pleaded for something. Help, forgiveness, understanding. Sarah did not know. She nodded at him slightly. A gesture that said, face this with dignity. Learn from this. Become better. Brad walked off with the management team. His career suspended. His reputation damaged. His whole life changed because of one flight. Jessica started crying quietly. Tom put his arm around her shoulders. Come on, he said gently. Let us go to the crew lounge. We all need some rest. They walked together through the terminal. Airport workers rushed past. Passengers hurried to catch connecting flights. Announcements echoed through the speakers. Life continued as normal for everyone else. But nothing was normal for them. In the crew lounge, Sarah collapsed into a chair. Her whole body ached. Exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Jessica sat beside her, still sniffling. Sarah, what happens to me? Jessica asked. Am I in trouble too? Sarah looked at her. That depends. Did you learn something tonight? Do you understand why what we did was wrong? Yes, Jessica said firmly. I made assumptions based on appearance. Based on prejudice I did not even know I had. I whispered and gossiped instead of treating him with respect. I'm ashamed of myself. Good, Sarah said, not unkindly. Shame means you have a conscience. It means you can grow. Just make sure you learn from this. Make sure you never make those mistakes again. I will not, Jessica promised. I swear I will not. Tom brought them coffee from the lounge machine. They sat in silence for a while, just processing everything that had happened. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Gregory at headquarters. Turn on your computer. Check the airline's internal message board. Sarah pulled out her laptop and logged in. The message board was exploding with activity. Dozens of posts. Hundreds of comments. The word had spread fast about what happened on Flight 237. Sarah read through some of the posts. Some were supportive of her actions, praising her courage. Some were defensive, saying Brad had just made a mistake. Some were angry at Mrs. Whitmore. Some were confused about what really happened. Then Sarah saw another post, this one from the CEO of the airline. It was addressed to all employees. Today we failed one of our passengers. We failed him because some of our crew made assumptions based on his race. They questioned his right to be in first class. They whispered about him. They treated him with suspicion instead of respect. This is unacceptable. This is not who we are, or rather, this is not who we should be. We are launching a comprehensive review of our diversity and inclusion training. Every employee will undergo mandatory retraining. We are also implementing new reporting procedures for discrimination. If you see something, say something. Do not stay silent. Do not look away. Finally, I want to recognize Sarah Chen, a senior flight attendant who stood up for what was right, who defended a passenger's dignity, who refused to compromise even when pressured. Sarah represents the best of who we are. She represents who we all should be. Thank you, Sarah. We can do better. We must do better. And we will do better. Sarah read the message 3 times. Her eyes filled with tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of relief. Of validation. Of hope that maybe, just maybe, this horrible experience would lead to real change. Her phone rang. It was her mother, Sarah. I just saw the news. Your airline is all over the media. Something about discrimination on a flight. Were you there? Are you okay? Sarah took a deep breath. Mom, I was more than there. I was in the middle of it. And yes, I am okay. Better than okay. She told her mother everything. The whispers. The assumptions, Mrs. Whitmore's complaint. Her decision to stand up. The call from headquarters. Mr. Westbrook's identity. The promotion. All of it. When she finished, her mother was crying. Sarah, I'm so proud of you. Your father would be so proud of you. Sarah's father had passed away 2 years ago. He had been a quiet man, a kind man, a man who taught her to treat everyone with respect, a man who faced his own discrimination as a Chinese immigrant but never let it make him bitter. I did what Dad would have done, Sarah said. I stood up. I did not look away. Yes, her mother agreed. That is exactly what he would have done. He would be so proud. They talked for a few more minutes and then Sarah hung up. She sat back in her chair feeling overwhelmed. So much had happened. So much was still happening. Over the next few days, the story exploded. Mrs. Whitmore's social media posts backfired spectacularly. Once the truth came out about Mr. Westbrook's identity and his documentation of the discrimination, public opinion turned against her. Her follower count dropped. Her posts were flooded with angry comments. Companies she did business with distanced themselves from her. Mrs. Whitmore issued a public apology. But it rang hollow. Everyone could see it was not genuine remorse. It was damage control. Too little, too late, Brad remained suspended. But true to Mr. Westbrook's wishes, he was enrolled in extensive diversity training, counseling, education about unconscious bias. Whether he would learn and grow remained to be seen. But he had been given a chance. Sarah started her new role as crew trainer. Her first class of trainees sat before her, eager and nervous. She looked at their young faces and saw hope, potential, the future. Welcome, Sarah began. I am going to tell you about a flight I worked. A flight that changed everything. A flight that taught me the most important lesson of my career. She told them the story, every detail, every mistake, every moment. The trainees listened with wide eyes. Some looked shocked. Some looked ashamed, recognizing their own potential biases. Some looked inspired. Here is what I want you to understand, Sarah concluded. Every passenger who boards your plane is a human being. They have dignity. They have worth. They deserve respect, not because they might be rich or powerful, not because they might complain or tip, but because they are human. That is enough. That should always be enough. A young trainee raised her hand. But what if you make a mistake? What if you have biases you do not even know about? Then you learn, Sarah said simply. You listen, you grow. You do better. We all have biases. We all make mistakes. The question is, what do you do when you realize you were wrong? Do you defend yourself, make excuses, or do you accept responsibility and change? The trainees nodded thoughtfully. Sarah continued teaching. Day after day, week after week. Some students struggled with the concepts. Some resisted, but most listened. Most learned. Most committed to being better. 6 months later, Sarah stood in Heathrow Airport again. She was waiting for a flight back to New York. As she sat in the terminal drinking coffee, someone sat down beside her. It was Mr. Westbrook. Sarah Chen, he said with a warm smile. Fancy meeting you here, Sarah laughed. Mr. Westbrook, are you testing another flight? Always, he said. But this time I am happy to report the service was excellent, respectful, professional. I think your training is working. I hope so, Sarah said. I try every day to make a difference, to teach people to see each other as humans first. Mr. Westbrook nodded. That is all we can do, try every day. To be better. To do better. To create a world where what happened on that flight becomes impossible because we have grown beyond it. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who had been connected by a difficult night, who had both been changed by it. Sarah, Mr. Westbrook said finally. Do you ever regret it? Standing up that night? Risking your job? Going through all the stress and attention? Sarah thought about it. About the fear she had felt, the exhaustion, the worry, the internet harassment, the doubts. All of it had been hard, really hard. But then she thought about the trainees she had taught, the policies that had changed, the conversations that had started, the awareness that had grown, the small moments of connection and understanding that happened every day now. No, Sarah said firmly, I do not regret it. Not for a second. Because it mattered. Because change is hard but necessary. Because someone had to stand up. Mr. Westbrook smiled. That is why I chose you. That is why I knew you were the right person to lead this change. Because you understand that doing the right thing is not about the reward. It is about the principle, the integrity, the character. A voice announced Sarah's flight was boarding. She stood up and gathered her bag. Safe travels, Mr. Westbrook, she said. Safe travels, Sarah, he replied. And thank you for everything you do, every day, to make the world a little bit better. Sarah walked to her gate. As she boarded the plane, she noticed the flight attendants. They greeted each passenger with genuine warmth. No whispers, no suspicious looks, just respect and kindness for everyone. Sarah sat in her seat and looked out the window. The plane began to taxi. Soon they would be in the air, flying over the ocean, connecting New York and London, connecting people and places and stories. And somewhere on planes all over the world, flight attendants she had trained were doing their jobs, treating passengers with dignity, seeing people, not stereotypes, making the skies a little bit more just, a little bit more kind. That was her legacy. That was what mattered. Not the social media attention or the praise or even the promotion, but the real daily work of changing hearts and minds, of teaching people to see each other truly. The plane lifted off the ground. Sarah closed her eyes and smiled. She thought about that first flight, that difficult night, that moment of choice when she decided to stand up instead of stay silent. It had been the right choice. The only choice, and she would make it again, every single time, because that was who she was. That was who she would always be. A person who stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The world needed more people like that. And thanks to her work, maybe there would be. One trainee at a time, one flight at a time, one moment of dignity at a time. That was enough. That was everything.